Oh, for a couple of seconds, United States Senator John Kennedy is here. Hey, Mr. John, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm well. Good morning, Robert.
You know, I no doubt we both watched the President's State of the Union message on Tuesday night, and I'm looking at some Democrat Party and mainstream media reaction to the speech, and they're using terms like divisive, angry, bellicose. I'm thinking, what speech were they watching? You've got to be thinking the same thing, right?
Yes. I mean, I thought the president gave a very good speech. He delivered it well. He's very good on television. It was well written. It was a combination of, let's talk about where we've been, tax cut bill, judicial nominations, regulatory reform, and then he talked about some of his ideas for the next couple of years. Many of his ideas, I think, are ideas that Democrats could support, as well as Republicans, trying to get control of the cost of prescription drugs, trying to replace our roads that are actual breaking insults to this century with an infrastructure bill. He talked about what he perceives as his middle ground on immigration. He talked about geopolitical politics, North Korea, Iran. Didn't mention Syria, which surprised me a little bit, but I guess he ran out of time. He did talk about Afghanistan. I mean, I thought it was a good speech. Some of his I was listening carefully for new ideas. He did talk about controlling the cost of prescription drugs. He didn't give a lot of detail, as presidents rarely do in State of the Union speeches, so I'm looking forward to those details.
I'm interested in that.
I agree with you.
Can I ask you more about that? Because I'm interested in that prescription. When we look at things like the EpiPen that's gone up from $57 to $500, I'm hoping that we'll see the president and you guys in Washington put the screws down on these drug companies. Do you think he really will do that?
Well, but don't know yet. I mean, there are some things you can do to get control of the cost of prescription drugs. Now, they will be very controversial. I'll give you one example, and I'm not recommending this because I'm still studying it. There are pros and cons of it. The biggest purchaser of prescription drugs in America is Medicare. Now, Medicare does not negotiate its drug prices with the pharmaceutical drug companies. It just kind of pays whatever they say.
Oh, boy.
And the law...
Pardon me, John. Sound familiar?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, really. The law prohibits Medicare from negotiating drug prices. The Veterans Administration can, and it has saved a lot of money. If Congress gave Medicare the authority to negotiate prescription drug prices, because it's such a large purchaser, it has terrific bargaining power, you would see prices go down. Now, that sounds simple. There are cons to it as well. It would be very divisive, but that's an idea that I will throw out on the table. Again, I'm not saying it's something we ought to do, but we ought to talk about it. The other thing you can do in most drug transactions, prescription drug transactions, there are middlemen. They're called pharmacy benefit providers. They're very opaque. They take a cut of the profits. Nobody knows how much that is. You could do a bill. Again, I'm not recommending it, but it'll be on the table. Depends on what's in the bill. But you could do a bill to try to make the pharmacy benefit providers less opaque and establish a fiduciary relationship between them and the consumer. Those are a couple of ideas. I don't know if they're going to be what the president recommends, but I will tell you they will be very, very divisive.
Mr. John, you had said a couple of seconds ago the president made a lot of suggestions, covered a lot of ground that you would think that the Democrats would have would get behind a little bit, and yet they sat there on their hands looking sour and dour as though they were headed for colonoscopies. And bluntly put, I don't think they did themselves any favors. I think they just look like a lot of angry people to the American public.
Well, I think many of our Democratic friends in Congress, in both the House and the Senate, are angry. I think the thing they're primarily angry about at the moment is immigration. Most of the Democratic representatives in Congress want to talk about amnesty for the DACA immigrants and only amnesty. That's all they want to talk about. They're happy, for the most part, that our borders are so porous and open. If they insist on just talking about amnesty, we're not going to get an immigration policy done. I mean, we're not. I'm not sure I will vote for amnesty under any circumstances, but I know that I wouldn't even consider it until the border is secure.
Excuse me, even the 12 years before the Dreamers could even start the citizenship process, you might not even vote for that?
That's correct. I want to see that we're going to be able to prevent a future DACA-like situation before we try to address the DACA immigrants. And that, to me, means border security. It means getting rid of the diversity visa lottery. It means curbing chain migration. It means adopting a commonsensical, colorblind immigration system based on merit, just like Canada and Australia have.
What the president
had the wall,
but that was what the president talked about, right?
Yes, but he did not. If you notice, I listened carefully. He talked about his 4 pillars. One of the pillars is not an immigration system based on merit, and I think the reason the president didn't mention it is because he's trying to find middle ground with the Democrats. But my feeling is, look, I think the American people will support some kind of legal status for kids, now adults, who were brought here as kids illegally. But I don't think they will support that, at least the people in Louisiana, until they are certain that our immigration laws are being enforced. And they're not. I mean, all you have to do is go down to New Orleans. I mean, I love New Orleans. It's an important part of our state. But our mayor there, Mayor Landrieu, has established a sanctuary city. If you're in our country illegally and you make it to New Orleans, you're pretty much safe. And the same is true for San Francisco and Chicago. And I don't think that's right. I mean, if you don't like the law, you ought to change it. But in the meantime, you have to enforce the law.